Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, and now just very recently we've had possibly the strongest indication yet that a new Yamaha R9 sports bike is on the way, with Kevin Boss, who's the team manager at Yamaha 10K Racing in the World Supersport Champs, publicly stating that they expect an R9 to replace the R6 that they're currently using within the next year or so. In his exact words, the only information we have is basically on the racing model. The racing model is already in heavy development, and many things are already happening about that. The only thing I can tell you for sure is next year in World Supersport, the Yamaha R6 will be replaced by the R9. But look, come on, it'd be absolutely crazy of Yamaha to spend all that time and money developing a brand new R9 race bike only not to launch a production road version, and so realistically we should be expecting one sometime soon, I guess. Now at the moment the R6 in many markets is only offered as a track bike as it struggles to pass modern day emissions regulations, and so that leaves a humongous gap in the Yamaha sports bike lineup from their R7 middleweight that makes 72 horsepower all the way up to their R1 superbike, which is more so around the 200 horsepower mark. An R9 would slot in and fill the gap quite nicely, and so in this video we'll go through everything that we know about it so far, along with how it compares with the R6 that it would effectively replace. By the way, for full transparency, all of the images that I'm using here are licensed from Carl Lee, who does these awesome renders of potential upcoming bikes, and so yeah, these aren't official images from Yamaha themselves, but it has to be said, he's done a wonderful job of these, and so I thoroughly recommend checking out his Instagram and YouTube channel to see more of his work. Now first up, the most obvious feature of a potential R9 sports bike would be the same inline triple engine as their MT09 Naked, XSR 900 Retro and the Tracer 9 Sports Tourer thing. This would be a big change in character to the inline 4 of the R6, and also having almost 300cc more capacity, it's going to have a very different delivery of power too. You see, while the peak power figures are actually almost identical, the CP3 inline triple has all the advantage of that displacement, and so it can produce that peak 4,500 RPM lower in the rev range at 10,000 RPM. Torque is also on another planet with 93 Newton meters peak made at 7,000 RPM, and that's compared to the 61 Newton meters made at 10,000 RPM on the R6. Basically, that's quite a long way of saying that you'll get a similar level of power, hopefully a broader spread in the mid-range as well, and you won't have to rev the nuts off it to get the most out of it. Plus, although there is something to be said for the acoustic pleasure that can be derived from an inline 4 engine, I would argue that the triple brings its own distinct flavour too. On top of all that, and perhaps most importantly when it comes to producing a road bike, although there's no specific breakdown of carbon monoxide emissions, hydrocarbons, stuff like that that's actually measured by emissions regulations like Euro 5, you can still see that the larger engine is actually far more fuel efficient at 5 litres consumed per 100 kilometers travelled, and that's compared to the 6.6 of the R6. So what's that? About 30% more fuel efficient, and also it produces significantly lower levels of carbon dioxide per kilometer travelled. The engine is only one side of it though, and it feels like there'll have to be plenty of adaptations required of the MT09 format in order to make it suitable for sports bike use. You see, if you put the figures side by side with the R6, you'll see that it's quite a bit longer, as you'd expect for a naked road bike, and the seat sits far lower as well. There's also a smaller fuel tank, although you could argue that's somewhat offset by the more efficient engine. And then you've got the weight, which is 193 kilograms wet to the 185 of the R6, and that's before you've added all the fairing and the front subframe that of course will be required to turn the MT09 into a proper looking sports bike. Take the R7 for example, which is the sporty equivalent of the MT07 parallel twin powered naked, where the R7 comes in at 188 kilograms, so 4 kilograms up on the naked, which tips the scales at 184. Now perhaps that extra heft won't feel that noticeable with all that extra shove in the mid-range that you'll get from that triple cylinder engine, but it still feels like there'll be some fairly significant changes to the geometry of the bike, for example, to get it to handle like a sports bike, and also the ergonomics to get that tail up, nose down riding position. Now, one of the areas in which a new R6 would massively benefit from being based upon an existing road bike would be, I think, with the tech. You see, the R6 hasn't really been updated that much over the years, especially now that it's offered as a track-only bike that doesn't really need many creature comforts. And so really what you've got is a very basic set of equipment with stuff like a cable throttle as opposed to the ride-by-wire that you'll find on most bikes now, and a super simple dash with an analog rev counter and a minimal LCD for speed and a few other rudimentary readouts. Now to be fair, that is pretty much all you'll need on the track, but if you put it side by side in a dealer with some of the new sports bikes from the competition, you have to say it would be looking a little bit dated. The MT-09 on the other hand has been very recently updated for the 2024 model year, and so it's got a very competitive suite of electronics, including a new 5-inch full-color TFT display, and that gets phone connectivity so you can handle messages, calls and music and stuff like that. There's also navigation as well through the companion Garmin app. And then there's a bunch of riding modes, a 6-axis inertial measurement unit which powers lean-sensitive rider aids like traction control, slide control, brake control, backslip regulator, and front-wheel lift control. And then you've also got their 3rd-generation quick shifter, which is customizable between 2 settings. Then you've got LED lighting all round that gives it that thoroughly modern look, as well as their emergency stop signals which flash under heavy braking to warn other road users of a quick deceleration. There's even some acoustic amplifier grills on the top of the tank which are said to enhance the sound produced by the air intake ducts, and while it isn't necessarily what you call a high-tech feature, you have to say it sounds pretty innovative. Now some of these features have already made it over to other bikes in the Yamaha lineup, such as the new XSR 900 GP, which is a half-fed, more sporty version of their XSR 900 Retro, and so yes, I'd absolutely expect most of this stuff to be carried over to an R9 if it eventually comes to market. Now from a styling perspective, well, I think the designs from Car give us a really good idea of how it could look, and I think it's also fair to say that Yamaha are pretty consistent across all of their sports bikes, so using the existing models for inspiration will probably give us a decent idea of what this R9 might look like. Generally, you've got sleek daytime running lights and then a central main headlight projector, sometimes an air intake mounted in the middle, and then there's also signature features across the rest of the bike like the grills on the tank and the gaps through the tail section, all of which combine for that signature Yamaha sports bike look. Personally, I think Car's probably got these renders about as close as you'll see, with that Yamaha formula wrapped around the mechanical rudiments of the CP3 platform. But as always, I'd love to know what you think, so do let us know down in the comments below. Now, I know only the race bike has been confirmed, but assuming this makes it to the road, I think it'll be a much more usable bike than something like the R6, with a much more generous mid-range and more modern features that you'd expect from a bike in 2024. But in order to gauge whether it's truly going to be any good beyond Yamaha's phased out models, you kind of have to compare it to the competition from other manufacturers, and that's got me scratching my head a little bit. You see, there aren't really that many 900-ish sports bikes on the market anymore, with most manufacturers only offering a more affordable middleweight like the R7 or the CBR 650R, the Ninja 650 or the new Daytona 660 from Triumph, or you've got the proper big bikes up over a litre like the R1 or the Fireblade or the Panigale V4 or the Aprilia RS V4 and stuff like that, and there's a big gap in the middle. Really, the only bike that I can think of that's, reasonably comparable would be the Ducati Supersport 950S, which uses their Testa Stretta V-twin to make around 110 horsepower at 9,000 RPM and 93 Nm of peak torque at 6,500. It comes with all the latest techie features as well as a more relaxed geometry and ergonomic than a thoroughbred Supersport, and so I think all in, you can see there are plenty of parallels there. Should that be a warning to Yamaha though? You see, if there aren't many bikes in this specific market, then despite a huge number of comments here on YouTube demanding that Yamaha produce an R9 as soon as possible, it could be an indication that not many people are actually willing to get down the dealer and spend their hard-earned cash on a bike of this nature. Either way, at least we can expect Yamaha to undercut the Ducati, which comes in at £14,500. Now, of course, there's no official word on a potential price for an R9 yet because there's no official word on an R9, but you'd have to expect it would come in somewhere between the Supersport and the 10-ish grand of the MT09 that it would be based upon. That, I think, would make for a very tempting proposition indeed, especially given just how good that CP3 engine is. As always though, I'd love to know what you think, so do let me know down in the comments below and let me know what you think I've got right so far and whether there's anything you think I've missed. Also, I'll leave my review of the MT09 on the screen now. I really like that bike, so a potential R9 sounds fantastic to me, so do give it a click and give it a watch if you haven't already. Hit subscribe as well if you haven't already to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.